Hey, welcome to Intune Training, the place to learn how to use Microsoft Intune. The Steve and Adam Show with me, the intern, and Steve, the...
Hello, person.
Hey, person? Yeah, cool. Steve's a person.
We'll go person.
Yeah, let's go with that. Hey, it's been...
Negative, I am a meat bag.
Exactly. It's been a while since I've been in front of a camera doing this stuff. It's good to be
publicly.
back. Yeah, exactly. No, it's been nice now that I'm allowed to go outside and touch grass every now and again. I don't have to be here, but here I am, talking remotely with my good friend Steve, and I guess we're going to do some stuff. So, Steve, what are we talking about today?
So it's really interesting stuff. What we're going to talk about is networking.
Networking. So, okay, it's Saturday, 2:43 p.m.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about networking. Okay.
Yeah.
Why are we talking about networking? I thought we did Intune.
Yeah. Well, explicitly, we're going to talk about network authentication. So even more interesting stuff, right? Like super, super interesting stuff. Everybody wants to know about this stuff.
Okay.
So why are we talking about it? Well, you go.
Well, I know why. I know why we're talking about it, because over the break, Steve got some new toys and he likes to play with new toys all the time. One of those things is, I don't know, some kind of network device. I don't even know what it is. I was over at your house a month ago. Anyway, so specifically, we're talking about network access control, right?
Correct. So this is network access control. Think of this in your corporate network where we're going to make sure you're connecting to your corporate network securely.
And we're going to get this working with specifically Cisco ISE.
Yes.
And we're going to configure everything so that those policies are configured and deployed through Intune. So it is linked to Intune. It is an Intune thing. So, this is one of those scenarios where, a lot of us in the managed space don't think that we ever really need to worry about networking. The network admins will do that sort of stuff. But Steve's actually got a very good slide deck that he's going to
have slides.
We do have slides. Let me do the thing. Have you got it ready, Steve?
Right. I have got it ready. Click it over.
Okay, sweet. I'm going to click this magic button.
Yeah.
All right. So the reason that we're doing this, yeah, exactly. The reason that we're doing this is to sort of solve a common thing. So, Steve, you can drive.
I definitely will.
Explain it a little bit.
So basically, this is our experience when we go in and talk to customers about Wi-Fi authentication. We all want to go modern. We want to make sure that we can deploy it out via Intune. And we have these big conversations and everybody gets philosophical, and then people aren't talking on the same narrative. And the question is why? And then let's step into that. And in my experience, we're going to have the network admins. They're going to give you the VLAN. They're going to give you the SSID. They own the Radius server. Radius, for all those in not coming into this with a little bit of knowledge, is where we do our authentication. And that's what the Cisco ISE appliance is. Just to be clear, we're using Cisco ISE because they're the easiest to get trial versions of the product.
Pretty much it, yep.
Yeah. You can use whichever product matches your environment. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter so long as you're using some sort of Radius service. Simple as that. Use the one that came with your vendor, with your network appliances and associated technologies, because they will do it best for your environment, is what I recommend.
For sure.
So typically you've got your network admins. They're going to own the Radius. They're doing packets. They're doing protocols, and they're talking VLANs. Cool. Where does that fit into end-use compute? Well, we care about the Wi-Fi profile. Okay, cool. That's easy. Well, you'd think. But then we've got to step into how are they in the authentication in the Radius server, and how are they doing all of those controls to make sure it's secure, and etc. And then we've got to, we mentioned the magic word being authentication. So we're going to have our identity admins. Our identity admins are going to sit there and make sure that we are doing using an authentication token to connect to the network, whether it's a certificate or a username and password, in a secure manner. And obviously, I said the magic word, security. Well, they want to be involved as well. And we're going to step into those security admins, and they're going to make sure that everything connecting to your network is secure, whether it's VPN, whether it's your Wi-Fi, whether it's any of those components. Cool. So I know in my experience, when I was internal IT, trying to get 4 teams like this working together to make sure you have a great experience.
Yeah.
Was not necessarily the easiest, and the translation layer between each of the teams wasn't necessarily on the same page. So what we typically see is wrong way. There we go. We typically are going to have those external consultants and experts that can mesh it all together, understand enough from each of the components and each of the spheres to say, hey, it's not hard. It's not complicated. All you need to do is this, this, and this, and we can step into that. And what we're looking at of this video, and there's going to be a couple of other videos. Sorry, Ben.
That's okay.
Where we're going to talk today about setting up the Windows authentication and making sure that all works and we can connect in using the Wi-Fi authentication. And we're going to bring in components from each of these scenarios to make sure that we're doing it securely so that you can have an intelligent conversation with each of these teams with their concepts. It's important.
It is important. I feel like there's a joke in here. Network admins, EUC admins, identity admins, and security admins go into a room to talk about a very simple task. Everyone comes out and we've got 14 new DLP clients that we need to deploy to our machines.
Correct.
Yeah, so security always wins, and it's always another agent that needs to be installed. Anyway, okay.
That's right.
So I think our goal here is that, this is kind of a very deep joke here, that the external consultants and experts know how to mesh everything together, but the teams don't really understand it enough to like let it happen nicely. Our hope is that at the end of this, and I think this transcends networking, the hope here is that the idea of wearing many hats is kind of important, especially in a modern management platform. You should know enough about all of this so that you can get this done to yourself. Now, most people that are working in just internal IT, that they're stuck doing BAU, they're stuck doing that sort of stuff. They can't really take a step back to sort of focus on the bigger picture. They say that they don't have enough time. Sure, that's a fair argument, but knowing this sort of stuff gets you to a position where you can be sort of in control of the narrative of what's happening in your organization. And if you know enough about this stuff and you can prove that, hopefully this video helps you, then you can actually start potentially getting the green light to do this stuff yourself. And then, you get to suck the air out of the network admin who doesn't understand anything about the identity. Just there's ways that knowing enough to get yourself into trouble is beneficial, and hopefully that's what we're going to show off.
And hopefully having the ability to get yourself out of trouble as well. That's the goal.
I'm sure that's fine. You just do that in prod, right? Okay,
exactly.
So this is going to be
some
pretty.
People are lucky to have a prod environment because most people have a test environment.
Yeah, exactly. We got lots of toys, and we're going to play with them all today. So,
exactly.
Okay, we're going to be pretty demo heavy here. Steve's going to do most of the driving. I have a pretty comfortable chair, so I'm just going to sit back and let you drive.
Cool.
So what are we going to do first? Let's okay. So we've got a demo laptop that is
here's my demo device.
Steve's babies.
Yes.
So what are we looking at first of all?
All right, so what we've got here, we're going to step into it really quickly, and I will apologize that I'm looking at the camera viewers. It's laptop's down here. So what you're going to see is we're connected to a Wi-Fi network called ISE demo.
Sweet, so it's done. We're all done.
Of course.
That was a really easy demo.
Done. Right?
That's how I like my networking.
Yeah.
Just works.
Magic. It's witchcraft.
Yeah, exactly.
And then what I'm going to step into here and why this is important will become apparent at the later in the video, but I'm calling out that we're connected to 192.168.20.51 as our IP address with a suffix of isc.lab.
Okay.
I'm very inventive with my domains.
Yeah.
As you can see. The other thing that I'm going to call out here, and I'm just going to go down over here, you'll see that I have a compliant device. And device compliance is important. So this is where we've connected on the back end, and we'll dig into this, and it's part of that whole configuration is we've configured ISE to talk to Intune previously, where we have the ability to now get the device compliant state from Intune, which is great. So as you can see, I'm connecting to my production network and everything's compliant. But what happens when it's non-compliant? So this is the part that we're going to step through for this demo. Is let me go to my device. So you'll see here I have my Windows device. From here, I'm just going to show you what I have because it's important. We go to desktop. This is that same desktop you'll see with the name. And we're going to go here and we've got compliance policies, and it's super, super simple. We have a compliant policy assigned. We're going to go over here to our compliance policies, and we're going to select our compliance policy. We're going to go to properties, and we're going to make it so it goes into non-compliance. Easiest way to test and validate this, make sure you set the default policy to be not compliant if no compliance policies are assigned. And then you just exclude it from the filter.
Cool.
So I have a filter that explicitly says, if my device manufacturer is HP, which the laptop is, I'm going to filter on this. And I'm going to change it from being an include, so the compliance policy assigns, to an exclude. Super, super, super simple, right? And then that will go through. And what's going to happen is I'm going to go here and hit, if I find the right button, and if I go to
I may
Windows,
already be on this, Steve.
Wow. I was going to say Ben's going to be doing this on the back end as well. So we're just going to hit that sync button consistently. And hopefully by the time we get to the end of the video, we'll be able to bring up the device and go, it's not compliant, which is important. And the thing is, it's not when the device on the client side is reporting compliant or non-compliant. It's when the service is reporting the device as compliant or non-compliant. Because we're not asking the device, we're asking the service as the external MDM. Cool. So that's the Intune component. I'm not going to go into setting up the profiles and all of that on the client side yet. We'll get there. It's important. But the thing to call out is we do have a certificate on the device using SCEP, and we have a root certificate on the device, and we have a basic Wi-Fi profile. Actually, I'll just quickly show you that.
Show the Wi-Fi profile, but for anyone that's watching at this point and they haven't seen the couple of videos that we've done on setting up SCEP and NDES and all that really fun stuff, we've done that. It hasn't really changed a significant amount.
No, just make sure you update your SCEP connector.
Yes, for sure. But you know, if anyone's not played with NDES or SCEP, lock the door and spend a weekend working on it, because once you know that, you're going to be able to get quite a few jobs in your future as soon as you nail that. Exactly.
So what I've got here is I've got my very simple ISE lab Wi-Fi profile. Very, very simple. I have an SSID of ISE lab, but my connection name is demo or ISE demo. So this is where you can change your presentation layer to your customer or your end user so they don't know what the SSID is. The important thing to note with the SSID, it's super cool. The important thing to note with the SSID is it is case sensitive. So you need to make sure if your SSID is capital, lowercase, it matches that. Simple, right? I mean,
it's simple for anyone except for people who have only worked in Windows world. I think case sensitivity becoming the standard is fantastic.
I do too.
Yeah, and I will die on that hill.
I know you will. I've watched you. It's quite entertaining. And I'm pretty simple. We're going to connect automatically if in range, connect if it's not broadcasting, even though I am broadcasting. This metered connection one's pretty cool, where you can sit there and say, I'm going to meter it because it costs me money to connect to this connection. Typically, you see that more with cellular LTE, not with Wi-Fi, but it's there.
It would also be for like kiosk scenarios as well, right? You know, if you want to control the data flow on a bunch of like just cafe machines or whatever.
No, that's where you do that at the radius level.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. This is more just letting the OS know that it's a metered connection.
That's right. So don't do updates, don't sync Outlook. There's a couple of caveats that are associated with being a metered network connection. So I've set this up as a user authentication because I want my user to authenticate. Everything else is not configured until we get down here to, if we keep going, to EAP type. So EAP, Extensible Authentication Protocol, it is an industry standard. We are very much pushing that because it's an industry standard. When I've set this up, the first thing that will have come up, and I'm not showing setting up the profile because it takes time to go through the stuff. But the first thing you'll see is it'll come up and say, is it basic or enterprise? We've selected enterprise just for reference. So we now have selected EAP TLS. You have a couple of other protocols that are available. PEEP is the other one of interest. The other two, they both work. They do what you need, but these are the two that typically get treated as the gold standards, EAP TLS and PEEP, for various different reasons. I'm not going to go into the difference because you can do that on the interwebs.
That makes me very happy to hear, Steve.
Because I could go very, very deep, but I don't need to.
Exactly.
When we're talking about server names, this one here catches a lot of people out. Most people would think that that's going to be your CA name, right? So your certificate authority. It's not. It is the name on the certificate that your Radius server is using.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So this
does
is
that
why,
say if you put over the info, does it specify that just near certificate name?
So you'll see that it's the common name used on the certificates issued by your trusted certificate authority.
Is that right?
Yeah, sort of. It's a. So you know the little box that you get that pops up to say, "Do you trust this network?" And trust this certificate. Right. This is how you handle that, and it's the name that appears there that needs to be put in there to be able to say, "I trust it" or not.
Interesting.
That's what it is.
Cool.
Then we've gone in and we've got our trusted group because we only have a root certificate. But if you have, and this is to trust that server, and this comes down to the EAP TLS model where we're trusting both sides of the connection. That's as far down that protocol I'm going to go because I can go a little further.
If you just a quick one on this because it's been a while since I've thought about certificates. If you had an intermediary certificate chain and all that sort of stuff, you would put the int in there. Okay, cool.
Yeah, put all the certificates in the chain in here, so it can be validated to make sure we're happy days. And there's a checkbox all the way through. Now that you can have one or more selected profiles.
Oh, previously, so in that scenario where you had. Okay, so in the scenario that you had a multi-tiered auth process, you'd have your root, you'd have your ints. Gotcha.
Because what this is actually going to do on the back end is going to create an EAP XML file that then gets pushed to the device. Okay, we could export that, but that may be a future video. We're then specifying our authentication model. Our method is going to be SCEP. You can use PKCS, sure. You can do derived credentials, sure. But the scenario we're using today is SCEP because we know it works and it's going to do what we need. We've selected our certificate profile. And if you have a proxy, you can go in here and automatically or manually configure it easy.
Sure.
The last one, if you don't need it, don't hit yes because FIPS protocols are, if you're not federal government, you know if you need FIPS. If you don't need FIPS, don't use it.
Specifically, if you've never heard of FIPS, select no. You're good. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's all good.
Nice. Okay, cool. So that's the basic profile that we're deploying out to our client machine that gets us automatically connected. Cool.
Yep. Done. All right.
So that's going. Wait, going back to that. The oh my god, I've forgotten what the name is. The slide deck that you showed. What we're looking at there is the end user compute Venn diagram. Is the end user compute space. Okay, the thing that we care about. Exactly. So what we're going to do now is go into the other stuff essentially.
Yeah. So now we're going to go and look at the network admin component. Let's be clear. It's the network admin / identity admins tangentially. So in our previous video on ISE, Adam and I talked about setting up our external MDM server. I'm just going to quickly show you that we've got that set up here. We're going to test connection, and you'll see that it'll pop up. What you'll note is if you're running Cisco ISE, you need to install the latest patch to make sure that it's using the API version 3, because this changed in June, I think.
Right.
2022.
Okay.
Cool. So this then allows you to add multiple different authentication options on the certificate.
Sure.
So very, very, very quickly, let me just quickly show you what that is, because it's actually kind of cool. Over here in our SCEP certificate, what I have set up on my SCEP certificate, if I can find my edit button, is no, that's not the one I want to do.
You want configuration settings.
They may have moved it around a little bit. So you'll note here, I've got an additional attribute in our SAN, being a URI attribute, and we're specifying ID, Microsoft Endpoint Manager, GUID, and there's our device ID.
Is that device ID is that the Intune ID or the AAD ID?
I believe it's the Intune ID.
Okay, cool. That makes
and we can have a look at that if we really want to go down to that level, but that's not what we're here to talk about. But that is where we're doing the authentication lookup or the validation lookup of the device on Intune to say, is this the correct device? Previously, so the legacy scenario was using MAC address.
And that's easy to spoof.
Well, it wasn't that it was easy. Easy to spoof, but the problem is, if you've got a Wi-Fi MAC address and a physical MAC address, it wasn't looking them up correctly. And then if you put in a docking station which has a different MAC address, and then
it just
huge whole cascading snowball. Device ID.
Nice. Makes sense to me.
Yeah. So that's what that's all about. So cool. We've got that connected. So we have our radius set up. Happy days. So next part that we're going to look at really quickly is we've got our external identities. I've got an Active Directory identity source set up, and I have
can I clarify something here?
Yes.
Because this is bringing back flashbacks that I don't need. Active Directory. We're talking modern device management. Is this on-prem Active Directory or is it AAD?
It is. So
it's
this is on-prem Active Directory. There are other options.
Okay.
So if we go over here to settings, we have a third option, another option. Yep. This is where you can use REST ID store.
Okay.
As you can see here, it should be thoroughly tested before using in a production environment and can only be used for EAP, TTLS, and PAP.
So controlled in introduction literally means it's beta. Like this is preview functionality. Be warned, it's probably not ready for prime time yet.
Correct.
The reason I bring that up, Steve, is this is all working on the idea that the device is trusted because there's the proof of trust is at Active Directory, and that is how the device is authenticating essentially. Okay. So cool.
This is where we're setting up Active Directory, and we're going to use the user component. We're not expecting the device to be trusted and authenticated.
Sure.
You do have options here around LDAP and SAML, where technically you can connect them into AAD as an application and do authentications like that. Or with LDAP, what you would do is AADDS, so Azure Active Directory Domain Services, and then you can do LDAP-S and do that authentication that way. But you then have to have a VPN route to your Azure server to do that authentication to be able to do it all locally.
Gets confusing, sure.
It gets really complicated really quickly. SAML, I don't believe gives you EAP TLS. It gives you a certain protocols, but not EAP TLS.
Not EAP,
it's complicated. The conversation when it comes down to, well, I want to do AAD only, I want to do zero trust is, well, do I need to do network authentication at that point, or could I go to a pre-shared key and go, well, there's nothing on the network that if somebody compromises it, that it really matters about. It's just straight out internet. So these are where when you're getting to the point to remove your Active Directory, you need to go, well, how do I care, or do I care about that authentication for my Wi-Fi or not?
Yeah. So this is, I mean, this is just going back back when we were playing with this stuff in the real world. That conversation was always there. It was like, okay, so you guys want to move to the cloud and only the cloud. You want to be, on the bleeding edge. You want everything greenfields. Okay, well, we're going to wrangle control away from the network team because you've promised that you're going to get rid of all of your on-prem infrastructure. What do you care about the Wi-Fi, having all of this security around it? But anyway, so in this scenario, we've still got on-prem infrastructure. We've got AD. And the reason that we want to do this control is because if a device is non-compliant, then we want to make sure. So this is sort of going a couple of steps back from our, dream end state of no management or no requirement for this stuff. But this is very much a real world scenario that a lot of people will find themselves in.
And this is where we're trying to reinforce that, yes, ideally we don't want to have on-prem, but there's going to be on-prem, and you can authenticate securely authenticate with your corporate network with an AAD joined computer. You don't need to rely on group policy.
Sure.
Very important.
Nice.
So what I've gone here is I've gone into that identity source sequence. And why is this important? We're wanting to specify that we're going to be using our ISE Lab certificate authority, which I didn't show you, and I'll show you in a second. And then we're setting our authentication search list. And this is where we're explicitly stating our Active Directory environment. And that's it. Super, super simple, right? We're not overcomplicating this. If we go in here and I go to my ISE Lab, you'll see that I'm just using subject common name as our certificate attribute. We have our identity store. We've got everything we need. It's so basic. Yeah. And that's intentional, right? So from there, we're then going to step quickly into our allowed protocols. Yes, there's a lot of protocols there. I'm not going to go through them all. The two that I'm going to call out is the EAP TLS. So at a very high level, think of this as I'm validating both sides of the connection before I can do the authentication. And how I'm validating both sides of the connection is each side needs to provide a certificate to say, yes, I am allowed to access.
Sure.
So then it creates a pipe between the two and allows that authentication. Pretty straightforward. But the downfall of using EAP TLS is you need a process to get the certificate on the device.
Yeah.
So this is where Intune can do that. But then in the corporate world, well, I have a chicken and egg. I can't connect to the Wi-Fi because I don't have a certificate, but I can't get a certificate because I can't connect to the network.
Yeah, and this is where we've found previously that a solution for that would be during your onboarding process having just an open thing that has no access to anything inside. It's just a pipe to the internet. You use that to onboard, and hopefully you set this up correctly so that once the device is compliant, it falls off that one network and goes onto the trusted one.
Yep. So one of the scenarios, or the other option you can look at there is PEEP. So think of PEEP as going to a HTTPS website. I'm trusting that site because it's got a certificate and it's all happy days. On the PEEP side, I'm sitting there and going, here's my username and password, allow me to get access. And it goes, yep, cool, not a problem.
Okay.
But because it's not validating both sides, it's seen as not as secure. But realistically, it's the same scenario as going to a website.
Sure, but basically EAP TLS has just got a lot more certificate handshaking, essentially. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Simple as that, right?
Aren't protocols fun?
Well, yeah. I have a slide on that one as well, but I'm not going to go into it here.
I bet you do.
And I could go very deep on this one. But in this scenario, we're going to talk about the preferred EAP protocol being EAP TLS because we want the gold standard. We love the gold standard. We've built it on our guest network, and we've gone through and we've grabbed that certificate, and we're all happy days. We've got our profile pushed down. So the next part that we step into is our policy sets. And I'm just going to step back one level here. What I have is the default policy set, and then from here I have my UDM. So I'm using Ubiquity. UDM is Ultimate Dream Machine. It's just so I understand what I've got there. Here is the protocols that I've previously specified, where I have my UDM protocols. And I'm sitting here and saying, if I'm connecting to wireless access and wired 8021X, I'm going to hit this protocol or this authentication package, so long as it meets those protocols. Sweet. We then step into this. And what we have here is 2 of the 3 A's of radius authentication or radius processing. We have authentication and we have authorization. What you'll hear around when we say authentication, you might see it written out as auth N, and for authorization, you'll see auth Z. The third A is accounting. You'll note that accounting isn't very promoted. It's typically used for hotel networks and things like that, where you want to do chargebacks or where you're wanting to account for what is being used on that network, what packets are being sent and received, and things like that.
Sure. So like kind of like bandwidth tracking-ish, not bandwidth tracking, but like just tracking what's happening in the for sure. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it's session tracking, things like that. Realistically, most organizations don't use accounting, but it's there and that's what it's for. But in our scenario, we're caring about authentication and we're caring about authorization. So from authentication point of view, my policy is really straightforward. I'm saying, well, my rule name is EAP-TLS. I'm sitting here and saying my EAP authentication equals EAP-TLS, and it's wired or wireless, and you must go and look at the ISE auth option, which is that group or object that we created that said, go and look at the certificates and Active Directory.
Yeah.
Sweet. And we have options sitting under here where we can sit there and say,
what happens if it fails?
Reject it. And you can put a whole heap of controls in this. You could spend days building this, months. But for what we're needing it for, we want super simple. Is it EAP-TLS? Yes. Cool. Elsewise, deny it. You can't do anything. And then under the authorization policy, we have, again, it's pretty straightforward. But there's a couple of things we'll call out here. So we're going and looking at our, we're making sure there's EAP-TLS for our authentication. I'm just going to edit this one here so it pops it up. It's a little bit easier to read. And then we're going and looking to see if our MDM device registration status is registered, which is going and checking in Intune to see if the device is registered. Yes, it is registered. Awesome. The next step that we're looking at is that the device compliant status is not equal to non-compliant.
Which is a backwards way of saying equals compliant.
And do you want to have a guess as to why we have to say not equals non-compliant?
No, I honestly don't know. Why are we doing it backwards?
Because this is how we can handle compliant and in grace period.
Oh, yes, perfect. Of course, because this is
because the option is binary,
compliant or non-compliant, but it's actually a 3.
It's a tri-state.
Interesting. Okay, cool. There we go. That makes a lot of sense. So
simple stuff, right?
But you want to don't save that.
Oh yeah, I'm not saving that.
Very good. So we've got 3 things where essentially. Yeah. So we're essentially saying, you can authenticate, your device is registered, and you have to be not compliant specifically. That's essentially our network access control for authorization. And then
that essentially gives us access to IC Corp net.
Yep.
Which we'll talk about in a second because I skipped those steps. And then what we're looking at here is the other option of registered and non-compliant
equals non-compliant. So there's no real difference here. It's just we've changed that Boolean value.
Correct.
Yep.
And then the last one is, we have EAP auth, but it's unregistered, which it shouldn't happen, but it can happen.
Yeah.
And we're just wanting to go, malicious, we're going to go to our restricted network.
Well, this is the catch in a try-catch statement, right? It shouldn't happen, but we want to catch that weird scenario where it might happen and chuck them on a different network.
And the thing is, what you can do here is, if you're wanting to go down a path of, why don't I go and have a look to see if we can do PEEP where we don't need the client certificate, I can sit there and go, well, I am going to authenticate with PEEP while my device is unregistered. And
sure, that makes sense.
You can connect to the same SSID.
Right. And that would be how you could, so that would be a scenario where you could get on the network while you're trying to do the onboarding, right? Because it's unregistered until it's registered. Yep.
Correct. But
that's cool.
And I'm going to put a very big but here.
I bet you are.
Yeah. Because of how the certificate and Wi-Fi profiles apply via Intune, which we've gone through previously, I think, but I can touch on it now, is when that Wi-Fi profile is applied and it's looking for the SCEP certificate, it's looking for the extensible settings in that certificate.
Yep.
To say, does a certificate from this CA exist on this device?
Yep.
So what can happen, and it all comes down to how your network is configured and everything associated, but you could get into a race condition where you're getting the policy before the certificate lands, and it's going to sit there and go, I don't have access to that network anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it would be really cool if you could set up like dependencies on policies, right? Where, this has to come down after, but then we're talking about task sequences, and we're not talking about task sequences today.
That's right.
Whatever.
But yeah, so just wanting to call that out because it is super important to flag that.
For sure.
So we're just going to quickly go and look at one other thing around the profiles. So if we're just going to step back over here, just bear with me while I do a little bit of navigation here. And if we go to our, it's not that, it is policy elements. And then if we go to profiling, and no, just bear with me, authorization profiles. And then under here, we have ISE restricted network. And what that does, it's pretty straightforward. My ISE restricted network, I'm going and I'm saying you are going to my VLAN 2, which is going to change the IP address.
Yeah, sure.
So when a device is not compliant, it changes the IP address. Why do you want to change the IP address? Well, that means you can sit there and say you've got only access to this.
Yeah, you want to put them in a walled garden. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you go and deploy DACLs and all of the crazy stuff? Yes. But we don't
could
need
do
to
anything.
But we don't need to go down to that level. We are doing super simple, which is we'll just change the VLAN.
Yeah. So the good news, Steve, while we've been looking at all this amazing stuff in Cisco ISE, our device has actually reported as non-compliant.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's pretty cool. And I didn't have to sit here hitting sync every 3 seconds. I just did it once, and we were patient. So
nice. So I think that covers off everything. Well, actually, there's one last part that we're going to look at, which is we're looking at the live logs. So to get to the live logs, we're going to operations live logs. And we're then going to have the ability to go in here and look at our authentication. What you'll note is Ben has stated that our device has been classified as non-compliant. But if I go and look at this policy, it's still saying it is compliant.
Interesting.
This means, well, this isn't incorrect. Because I'm not going constantly authenticating, I'm not going to go and see I'm non-compliant.
Right. So what would happen essentially is the next time you connect to the network. So if it drops off and then you come back on, it will enforce that. Okay.
Yeah. So it's important to understand that, because some people may freak out, and you just need to understand, look, it's only doing that compliance check when you authenticate. And that's important because
it's a retroactive thing, right? It's not active monitoring and remediation. It is, hey, your device isn't compliant. Realistically, what are the options? What are the scenarios where something's going to go non-compliant and then stay online all day? You're probably going to move around, and if you jump, like, let's use the office space, which I don't really remember what an office looks like anymore. But you move from access point 1 to access point 2, you're going to reauth. So like in a real world scenario, this is going to happen very quickly.
Unless there's a pass auth. Well, there are scenarios where it won't, but yes.
Yeah, but in a real world scenario, you will be reconnecting multiple times a day. So, worst case scenario, you'll be online for a couple of hours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So at a high level, and I'm just going to quickly go through this before we step into the other one, because then you'll see a different scenario.
Sure.
What we're going to see here is we're going to our authentication policy, which is the EAP TLS. Happy days. And then we're going and talking about our authorization policy. So this is our auth N, and this is our auth Z. So our auth Z is EAP TLS, Intune, registered and compliant. Cool. So we're compliant. And then what our result is you're getting access to CorpNet. That was before I renamed it. It's now ISE CorpNet, but
right. Okay.
It was so it bundled it together in the presentation line. Don't mind me.
I get you.
So then what we go through here is we can see all of the additional information about our endpoint, and we can see, well, what our username was. Yes, very inventive. We can see that it's an Intel device. It's a calling station. And we can step through what's actually going on with that device. And my appliance that I'm using was on 192.168.1.1, which is, wow, that's what everybody uses at home, right?
Yep.
And we can step through, we're on CorpNet, cool. And then we're going into other attributes. And other attributes is actually where it gets really interesting. We can step in and see our connection speeds if your appliance enables that. We have our state, which, well, it's gobbledygook, but could be useful for somebody.
Sure. Yeah.
But we can go down here and we're going and looking at our authentication. So where are we doing our authentication? Did it pass it? Yep. This is the policy, which is the EAP TLS and match this rule. Cool. Serial number of the certificate making the call. That's useful because then you can go and see if you're having problems, you can go and look up that certificate and go, why?
Yeah.
Here's our GUID. So let's grab that GUID and let's see what it does.
So this is interesting. Okay, so let's see if we can figure out whether this is the Intune object or the AAD object.
Yep. So it starts with 82ACC.
Oh, wait. Hey, I'm already on it. Let me check. What did it?
Let's go
82ACC? That is the Intune object.
So then we go and have a quick look in the device just to show the viewers at home.
What do they need to see? I got excited.
And
so there we go.
There it is there.
And that makes sense because the things that we're doing aren't AAD based; they're Intune based. The policies are coming from Intune. We're handing off the device ID. That actually makes a lot of sense, and it's cool that we clarified that. Yep. Good work, Steve.
Not a problem. And then we also go into our subject
what is this
email.
Domain, Steve? This is not Intune.training.
No, this is more a one that I'm using for other demonstrations, and I needed to not to be tied to Intune training. So one of my good friends is a real estate agent, and the gag that I always play on him is that he's a used house salesman. So I registered
Steve
the
went
domain.
And bought the domain and gave it to him as a gift.
And he said, no, I don't want it.
Like it.
I don't know why.
No, neither do I. It's a lost opportunity. I would definitely buy a house from someone named Used House Salesman.
Exactly.
Nice.
So we've got our resolved identities, which is actually our AD object. As you can see, because it's ISE.lab.
Yeah.
We have our resolved DN or distinguished name from AD, which is pretty cool. And it gives us all of these additional data points. We then have our TLS version, cool, whatever. Subject names, info, and we're getting more information about the certificate. So you can go and build a rule on any of these components, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And if you've got a rogue access point, you can start putting in rules to say, not that access point, blah, blah, blah.
Gotcha.
And then on the right-hand side, these are all the steps that it went through. So if you're having problems, you can see, well, this is what a good one looks like. This is what a bad one looks like. And go and see at what step it's failing, and then do some Google foo and bring back, well, that's where it's having the problem.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So pretty straightforward, mostly. But now what we're going to do is we're going to go and bring up our laptop again. As you can see, it's now saying that I can't access company resources, but I can. So if I go down here, I'm just
Sure.
going to config. IP address hasn't changed.
Okay.
So the next step that we're going to do here is we're just going to turn off our Wi-Fi
Yeah.
and then turn it back on.
So imagine we've
It should
just stepped into a
auto-connect.
meeting room and got a new a new access point connection.
Yep. So now I have still the ISE demo. If we do the up arrow and bring up IP config, and it didn't release the IP address.
I should love it when demos just work.
Well, it wouldn't be Intune training if it did. And then what we're going to do is
Renew.
We are going to renew. But what it could also be is I've screwed up my VLANing. So let's go over and have a look on the ISE.
Sure.
So let's go here. We can see that there was a failed attempt. Cool. But we're going to grab this one here, which is the most recent one, and it's actually flagged it as non-compliant.
Nice.
So obviously I've not configured my VLAN correctly. Oh, no, I have. It just didn't update the IP address. So let's go back over here. And
just needed to do a release renew. Oh, look, and it's gone to 10. Okay.
Yep.
So, and again, in real world scenarios, not theoretical lab world, like we're all so used to, IP addresses expire and change a lot faster when there's, dozens or hundreds of devices. So, the scenarios that we run into, and this is something maybe even surpasses what we're talking about now, but the things that you pay attention to while you're testing are not the things that are of concern in real life. So the speed of a result coming in your end user doesn't care. The IP address will refresh and renew faster in production than it will in your demo environment. So, there's things that you need to be comfortable with, knowing that just because it takes you a couple of steps to verify a thing in your demo does not mean that that's actually going to be the end state in the production environment.
Exactly. And that's a really good call out. So let's have a quick look. We can see that it's still EAP TLS. So we've still got our gold standard for authentication.
Nice.
But it's now going to our trusted, we're going to get remediated network. Straightforward, right? And down here,
once you've set it all up, yeah.
Yes. So in here, you should see the VLAN that it's attached to has changed somewhere. But all of this is identical except for the VLAN here. So you can now see that it's going VLAN tag 2.
Gotcha.
And that's it. Like if we go back and look at the other policy all the way down the bottom, it was VLAN tag 3.
That's really cool. So, hopefully that makes sense to someone out there watching this. I still think networking is terrible, but hopefully that shows you that, with the fact that we can now integrate with the compliance data from Intune, it really makes this sort of control of your networking and segmentation really, really easy once it's all set up. And
probably the thing that I will call out here as well is we didn't need to install an agent. We didn't need to install anything on the device to be able to do that. This was just, we are going to deploy a certificate, deploy a profile, and we have compliance state sitting there. What we can do with the Intune compliance state is we can then go and check security controls to make sure that it's secure. We can now go and run PowerShell commands during that compliance state to go, are we compliant or not?
Interesting.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. There's lots of fun stuff that we can do. Let's not dive into that today, though. I think that was a fantastic demo, Steve. For those of you that are watching that are doing networking in your job, you are doing a better job than I ever will or would. But hopefully this explains that, the simple fact is that we can now integrate and interrogate data from Intune for compliance, and it allows us to, be in control of what actually gets onto our networks.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I think that covers off for the Windows side of what needs to go on there.
Nice. Well, Steve kind of threatened that we'd be doing more networking videos coming up. So I guess the next couple of weeks for me are going to be fun-filled. But Steve, this has been fantastic as always. For everyone that got this far in the video, thank you very much. If anyone's got any more questions around this stuff or wants more clarification, leave comments down below. If we've got any more light reading around how to configure those things, we'll put links in the description. But otherwise, happy networking. I guess I'm going to leave it at that.